Hello everyone, welcome to the Hindu analysis for 5th March 2021. Let us begin with the first article today. 20 from Myanmar seek refuge in India. Now, this is one of the drawbacks or fallout of whatever that is happening in Myanmar. In Myanmar, currently there is a lot of unrest because the military police are cracking down on peaceful pro-democratic protesters. As of yesterday evening, close to 50 people lost their life due to coercive action taken by the military of Myanmar. As a result, people who feel that their life is in danger might try to flee the country to their neighboring countries. These people are called refugees. If you remember, Myanmar has a long history with refugees. During the Rohingya crisis, Rohingya people who were being persecuted by in a sense, the Myanmar military ran from their hometowns to surrounding countries. One of the countries that received the highest number of Rohingyas was Bangladesh. This led to turmoil in internal politics of Bangladesh because Bangladeshi people said at least certain sections of the Bangladeshi people did not want Rohingyas to come into their country. Now, the Bangladeshi government, which could not handle the high influx of Rohingyas into their country, finally agreed that they are going to resettle them in a small island which is climatically vulnerable. This led to a large scale condemnation from international organization and civil rights organization and human rights organization. Despite that, the government of Bangladesh went ahead and decided that they are going to relocate these Rohingya refugees in a small island off the coast of Bangladesh. Now, this is how refugees are being treated. Since India is more stable compared to other countries in the region, there is a greater chance that people who are being persecuted by the military of Myanmar might find refuge in India. In that lines, 20 people, most of them thought to be security personnel who could not tolerate the orders given by the military dictatorship in Myanmar, entered India illegally and are seeking refugee status in India. So this is not going to be the last case where people from Myanmar are going to flood to India. This is just the beginning. Until and unless a peaceful resolution is found in Myanmar, either it has to be through international intervention or through dialogue, democracy has to be restored. At least otherwise, refugees from Myanmar, the number of refugees from Myanmar fleeing to other countries is going to rise in the near future. Coming to the next article, OTT platforms will not have to register center. So what has happened till now is that OTT platforms such as Netflix, Amazon, Hotstar and other such OTT platforms were largely unregulated. The government did not say or at least tried to control these online platforms and they were left to their own devices. But now this gave these OTT platforms a way of free will where they operated as they wished. So this has led to a lot of controversies where certain TV series, certain films were being made which were insensitive towards some others' sensitivities. And this led to a widespread criticism and widespread controversies where people were being sued for hurting the sentiments of certain religions, certain people and so on. Now on 25th of February, the central government has notified new rules and guidelines for OTT platforms and digital news media outlets. Now, according to these guidelines, the OTT platforms and news portals, particularly digital news portals, will have to formulate a robust 3-tier grievance redressal system or a mechanism. Meaning the government came out and said that you have to create a 3-tier system where people's grievances will be addressed by your own self. The government is not going to get involved in the process. You have to create a mechanism that has to be in 3 steps or 3 stages where an individual's grievance against you or certain content that you display on your platform or put up on your platform should be addressed by your own mechanisms, and it has to be done in a swift way. Now, what are the rules provided for? the rules provide for two levels of self-regulation. Meaning, the three-tier system is for grievance addressal. Earlier, the government also came out with self-regulating rules, meaning the government said that these are the guidelines that you have to follow to regulate the content on your platforms on your own accord. We are not going to get interfered in the regulation aspect. We are just going to give you the guidelines and you have to adhere to them on your own on a trust basis. So what are the self-regulation levels? It gave two options or two levels of self-regulation to these OTT platforms. The first level of self-regulation by the platform was through grievance redressal, and the second by an institutional self-regulatory body comprising of industry experts and headed by a retired Supreme Court judge or High Court judge or any other independent eminent personality in the relevant field. These are the two grievance these are the two levels of self-regulation methodologies that was suggested by the Government of India to these platforms. Now, adding to that, the government also formulated an oversight committee, which happened to be an interdepartmental committee constituted by the government. If the grievance given by a person could not be resolved at the first two levels, meaning at the company level and the second committee level, then the Ministry of Broadcasting would suggest or escalate that specific grievance to the third level committee, which is an interdepartmental committee that will be constituted by the Government of India. This is the three-tier system which the government adopted to ensure that any grievances raised by the public will be addressed in a systematic and legal way. To all this, the OTT platforms are also required to classify all films, web series or other shows based on few criteria. One is age of the viewers, theme and messages, violence, nudity, sex, language, substance abuse, horror, content, tone and impact, along with target audience, and complementing the target audience aspect with, to addition to all of this, it also has to implement the parental controls methodology. Or it has to implement the parental control option to the content that is being displayed on these platforms. So this was the new rules formulated by the central government to at least in a way ensure that whatever content that is being displayed on these OTT platforms remain culturally relevant. Coming to the next article, this is directly in line with the earlier article we discussed. The content needs to be checked, says Supreme Court. Currently, there is a case going on between the head of the Amazon Prime Video India and a group of people who found it as offensive, particularly on a show that was being telecasted on Amazon Prime Video platform. The show was called Tandav, and certain people of society complained or approached the court stating that in the show Tandav, Hindu gods were depicted in a wrong way or in a uncouth way. So, acting upon the complaint, the Supreme Court called for the Amazon Prime Video head to submit an affidavit in the court. During the arguments, the Supreme Court on Thursday made it amply clear that over-the-top platforms such as Netflix and Amazon Prime Video, particularly to these OTT platforms, that the Supreme Court is in favor of screening the content that is being shown by these platforms. So this is an interesting development on the screening or censoring of online content. The government, though it released OTT guidelines, it reduced or stopped itself at the grievance addressal part of the OTT censorship. It never went to the content of the OTT platform or content that is being showed by these OTT platforms. When the highest court of the country itself says that whatever the content that is being shown through this over-the-top platforms such as Netflix or Amazon Prime Video, because of the content that they are showing, the court observed that some of the films that were being hosted by these platforms showed pornographic content, meaning nudity and other such pornographic content. Now, Supreme Court is clearly saying that there is a need for this content to be screened, and the court is also of the same conclusion that we also think that there should be some screening of the content that is being hosted on these platforms. The judge, which was led by Justice Ashok Bhushan along with Justice R. Subhash Reddy, observed that traditional film viewing has become extinct. Now films and web series are viewed by public on these platforms. Should there not be some screening? We feel that there should be some screening. There is pornography on some films. So he clearly say both the justices here are of same conclusion that whatever the content these people are showing in these OTT platforms, though there is an argument that freedom of expression, so whatever the content that they are showing is part of or comes under the freedom of expression aspect of the law, the judge observed that when the films and TV shows that are being telecasted and screened at large theaters are being censored or screened for their content, why not the same web series or films that were being hosted on these platforms? So we have to wait and see how the judgment plays out. When the sitting bench itself observes that there is a need for screening or censoring of this content that is being displayed, so it would set a precedence, or the court might pass an order to the government itself to constitute a censor board for OTT platforms. It is still a speculation, but there is a chance or there is a scope where the Supreme Court can order the government of India to set up a committee or constitute a panel to either study the feasibility of a censor board for OTT platforms or outrightly order the government to set up a censor board for or screening board for, not even censor, just screening board for the OTT platforms. So this would increase the transparency. This would ensure that both the government is protected and the OTT platforms are also protected from further grievances or further litigation, because if the certification of the films or the web series that are being shown have adult ratings, outsiders cannot, complainants cannot just file complaints saying that whatever they are showing is not good, because they went through the proper government channels and they got the proper certification. So this would remove the self-regulatory aspect from the hands of the OTT platforms and into the hands of the government. We have to wait and see how this case further develops. Coming to the next article, with Biden, India may need a new template. One thing that you have to understand about India and US relationship is India enjoys a bipartisan support in the Congress, meaning both Democrats and the Republicans support India as a nation and idea. Now, the problem comes with certain members of the Congress from both sides who are liberal in ideologies and sometimes critical of Indian policies, particularly Indian domestic policies. This poses a challenge to India's interest in the US administration, because at the end of the day, the US administration is answerable to the US Congress. So when this congressmen or the members of the Congress question the dealings that the US administration is making with Indian government, then it becomes harder for the US administration to engage with India. So India must have an approach where it has to deal with US government at one side and the US Congress members on the other side equally on an equal footing, because at the end of the day, the US government is answerable to the US Congress, and without the blessings of the US Congress, any future agreements or bills that are particularly related to Indo-US relationships will not be able to be passed successfully. So the current issue is there are certain members in the US Congress who are critical of India. This will pose a challenge to the US Biden administration if it intends to take the Indo-US ties to the next level. Now, what is the first instance that you get when you talk about or engage with US Congress members? The first signal of possible direction can be interpreted from the recent formal interaction that the members of Indian caucus in the House of Representatives held with Indian envoy in Washington DC. The Indian caucus is a group of congressmen or representatives of the US Congress who work towards having a better relationship with India. They think though they are US congressmen, the caucus works for trying to make a better relationship with India. So they engage on all levels of governance and policy. Now, our Washington DC representative, our Indian envoy, met with few members of the caucus, that is the Indian caucus. When the organized meet was done, our ambassador to the United States, Taranjit Singh Sadhu, was successfully done. We don't know who asked for the meeting, but at the end of the day, the members of the caucus came out and said that whatever the protest that is happening in the farmers' protest case, the Indian government must ensure and follow all democratic norms and allow the farmers to express their right to protest and show their dissent. At the end of the day, the chairman of the caucus or the co-chairman of the caucus said that all friends of India hope that the parties can reach an agreement. This statement is also not critical of India. All they are saying is that whatever the government is trying to do there, it has to be democratic and it should not suppress the right of the people to protest. Now, this interaction between the government officials and the congressmen is a regular exercise. Our officials meet them, they request our officials or our embassy staff to set up a meeting so that they can get better understanding of the ground realities that are happening in the Indian subcontinent. So this happens on a regular basis. And one more dimension that we have to explore is the growth of bilateral trade or bilateral relations in particular. One of the aspects that ensure that Indian interests are best served in United States are NRIs, are Indian Americans who made America as their residence. NRIs, non-residential Indians, particularly Indians, not even NRIs, Indians are the second largest immigration community in the United States. We Indians almost make up 4 million plus people in America. These are citizens who have either residency status in United States. Now, whenever India was in trouble in the past, or whenever we were put under sanctions because of our nuclear tests or our civil nuclear deal, these Indian American groups who are wealthy, who are educated, most of them are doctors, engineers, and these people are rich, these people are educated, they come to the rescue of India because they communicate with their own Congress representative from their state or from their county, and they would ask the representative to see what the facts are and ensure that India was always projected in a positive light. So this helped India to come out of a lot of sanctions because of the strength, because of the money that these Indians have in United States. Congressmen or the people representatives also listen to them, because at the end of the day, any congressman who is running for US Senate will need funding money, and Indians are the highest contributors to political causes in United States. Now comes the conundrum. Over a period of time, the new generation of Indians in America are deviating from engaging with the congressmen or their respective politicians in respect to India. A recent study was done by a certain university in the United States where they averaged a group of older people and older Indians and younger Indians who are living in United States. The older age group Indians said that they always work for the better interests of India. The younger generation who are either born directly in United States or born citizens of United States but have of Indian descent, they say that they don't identify with the ideologies of the Indian subcontinent. So this comes at a time when India is struggling to find a footing in the US Congress because of a lot of opposition from the liberal side of the US Congress. And today's community is less willing to engage with lawmakers and their aides with the same sense of purpose as it did on earlier account of different perceptions of events in India. Aides are very important. Aides are people who support the congressmen in the US Congress. They are like personal secretaries, but far more important than personal secretaries. Whenever a congressperson or a congresswoman is making a decision, the aides who are standing beside her support or ensure that the congresswoman is aware of all the things. They give a lot of input to the congresswoman or congressman in the US Senate. The perspective that these people give carries a lot of weight. Now, whenever you want to change the idea of a US Congress person or a Congress member in the US Senate, you catch hold of these aides who are supporting her or him and ensure that you get your point across to them, and these people will either directly or indirectly influence the thought process of the sitting member of the Congress. So whenever the new generation of Indians who are residing in America are unwilling to engage with either the lawmakers of US Congress or their aides, the sense of purpose, meaning our narrative, is being lost because there is no link between the US lawmakers and Indian government or India in a whole. Particularly coming to the aspect of the Indian farmers protest, it attracted a lot of international attention, and it also attracted US attention also, because few celebrities who are from US tweeted in support of the farmers protest. Our Indian government was very reactive and critical of these comments made by certain celebrities of United States. Though the United States government did not reply or anything, it just ignored this back and forth between the government of India and these celebrities. You have to note that whenever our external affairs minister or our secretary of external affairs state makes certain statements, US tend to note those statements. So whenever we speak, it has to be very measured and calculated. Now, coming to the how India is doing in the US capital, that is Washington DC. From the past few years, India has also stepped up its outreach on the Capitol Hill area. We started engaging with the lawmakers more. We started hiring lobbyists. In Washington DC, apart from the president and the lawmakers, the next powerful people in Washington DC are the lobbyists. You hire a lobbyist, the lobbyist will work day and night to ensure that your point is getting across and whatever your ultimate goal is reached. If you are being sanctioned by the United States Congress, if you hire a lobbyist, they'll try to soften the blow. In some cases, they even ensure that you are not put under sanctions. That is what Pakistan does. Pakistan hires some close to hundreds of lobbyists from all around Washington DC just to ensure that whenever the US Congress is trying to vote on something that is not beneficial to the Pakistan, the vote comes to a standstill, or at least some aspects of the critical aspects of the bill that was being proposed are diluted. That is how Pakistan escaped sanctions of the US Congress for so long. They use lobbies. Now, though India used lobbies in the past, we never used them extensively. Now, for the first time, we are using lobbies. The second way of engaging with Washington is through our external affairs minister and our foreign secretary. Both served as Indian envoys in Washington DC. They worked as ambassadors to ambassadors to India in United States and were posted in Washington DC. So these both people know how the internal mechanisms of the Washington DC politics work. So they know how to engage and whom to engage with. And for the past few years also, our Indian missions, meaning our Indian embassies stationed in United States and other countries, have started actively engaging with the lawmakers of their respective countries. Whenever a congressman or a congresswoman posts or issues a statement in critical of India, our Indian missions are at the forefront of the response, stating that whatever the statement given by the respective congressman or congresswoman is either infactual, and it would be a great honor if you could give us your time and let us explain what are the ground realities of it. Earlier, our Indian missions never used to engage with the Congress lawmakers of that country respectively. Now, our embassies are proactively engaging with the parliamentarians of the respective country. As I said earlier, we started hiring lobbies in the Washington DC. We have also started having think tanks that are based out of India, working for Indian interests in the United States. So these are all the proactive steps that are being taken by the Indian government to have a positive impact on both the US Congress along with US administration. If we have a good footing and a goodwill, bountiful of goodwill in US Congress, it becomes easier for the Biden administration to engage with India in a free and open manner, because they would have less pressure from the US Congress. So these people also would have better they'll have free access to engage with India on other multiple points. Now the challenge, what is the first challenge that Indian US relationship will have for the Biden, particularly from the Biden administration? It would be the purchase of S-400 from Russia. Now in 2019, both the governments, the United States and India, agreed for a 2+2 meeting, and through that meeting we also agreed upon a pact where our parliamentarians will visit the US Congress and the sitting members of the US Congress will visit our parliament. This will ensure that the ideas of exchange between both the parliamentarians and the parliamentaries is free and fair. Now this will also ensure that whoever the congressmen or congresswomen who are visiting from the US Senate or House to Indian parliamentary system and Indian parliament proceedings, they'll on ground level see that how things are proceeding here. This will add weight to our narrative that we are trying to weave in Washington. When these Congress lawmakers see how the process is being played out in Indian Parliament, then they can clearly say that yes, whatever the narrative that was being built by our opposing forces is either false or based on lies, and it has a good impact on our narrative, or at least our efforts to build a positive narrative in the Washington DC area. Now this will ensure that these lawmakers who visited India will amplify the effect, and they'll ensure that the Biden administration will move in the direction of pro-India ideology, not pro-Indian policies. At the end of the day, as a country, we have to ensure that whatever the policy that US administration is thinking of in terms of Indian continent, it has to be for the welfare of both the countries, not against our country or our economic interests. It should be welfare of both the countries. It should be that win-win situation for both the countries. Now, the accumulated reservoir of goodwill by Indians should help in defining the future course of bilateral ties, as it would help because at the end of the day, the US government trusts the Indian government a lot, because we were never, though our history between with US and its administrations have been at loggerheads sometime because of our closeness to the Russians, but over a period of times the relationships have improved, and particularly in the era of Trump, the relationships were taken to a new heights. Whether you like him or not, it was a good period for India in terms of Indo-US relationships, because the relationship we finally ironed out certain logistical agreements which allowed India to access critical communication technology from United States. Now, as I said earlier, we are going ahead with the purchase of S-400. Now, Turkey also bought S-400 missile defense system from Russia. So, automatically the US Senate imposed the Countering Americans Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, CATSA Act, on Turkey. As Turkey did, India is also going ahead, despite opposition from the US government not to buy the S-400 missile defense system. India is going ahead and went ahead and bought the S-400 defense system from Russia. Now we have to see whether US will impose the CATSA sanctions on India. Though there is a proposal to impose sanctions on CATSA sanctions on India, neither the Biden administration nor the lawmakers in the Congress are very particular about imposing these sanctions, because at the end of the day, India is a friend of United States, and India is the only ally in the Indian Ocean region, along with Australia and Japan through Quad, are working to counter the Chinese influence. So it is a good, we have to entirely rethink our approach towards Biden administration and how we engage with the lawmakers in the US Congress. Political talks back on table, NCN-IM. So Isaac Muiva faction of the National Socialistic Council of Nagaland has said that the Indo-Naga political talk process are back on the table and progressing. So earlier this few months back, the governor of Nagaland, Mr. Ravi, made a critical statement against the armed factions of Nagaland. He said that armed gangs are running Nagaland and questioning the sovereignty and integrity of the nation, and they are challenging the state government. Mr. Ravi is the official government appointed interlocutor for the peace talks or the Naga talks. When he made that statement, the NSCN-IM faction, the Isaac Muiva faction, withdrew from the talks, stating that whatever the statements were made by the respective governor were ill-informed and untrue. So stating that that he had heard their sentiments and accused him of derailing the peace process, and they pulled out of these talks. After back channel negotiations, finally the IM faction of the NSCN is back to the table of talks, and they are further discussing the peace process in Nagaland. The peace talks have been going on for past few decades and they have yet to be finalized. Coming to the next article. Bengaluru, Shimla, most livable cities. Housing and Urban Affairs Minister Hardeep Puri Singh released the Ease of Living Index of India for 2020. In this, 1101 cities were participated, and during this, citizens' feedback was also conducted, and out of them, Bengaluru and Shimla were ranked as the most livable cities in the categories of cities with more than or less than 1 million of population. This study is conducted annually by the Union Housing and Urban Affairs Ministry. This is called Union Housing and Urban Affairs Ministry Ease of Living Index. Along with this, another municipal level index was also released called Municipal Performance Index of 2020, which again rated 111 municipalities on their services, finance, policy, technology and governance. Among this 111 municipalities, Indore topped the ranking of municipalities with over 1 million of population, followed by Surat and Bhopal. This is the Ease of Living Index released by Housing and Urban Affairs Ministry. It released two indexes. One is Ease of Living Index, where Bengaluru and Shimla topped the rankings in cities category, and it also released another index called the Municipal Performance Index of 2020, in which Surat and Bhopal topped the rankings along with Indore. Indore was the first one, followed by Surat and Bhopal. Coming to the next article, Pak PM to seek trust vote tomorrow. So yesterday, Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan's party lost the majority in the parliament because one of his colleagues lost election in the supplementary elections that were conducted in Pakistan. Accordingly, Prime Minister Imran Khan on Thursday said that he will seek a vote of confidence on March 6th. The trust vote was necessitated because the finance minister, who was named Abdul Hafiz Shaikh, lost a Senate election that was conducted on Wednesday. He was defeated by former Pakistan Prime Minister Gilani. Now this comes at a time when there is a lot of opposition to the ruling party in Pakistan, that is Imran Khan's party. Imran Khan's party came to power with the promise of weeding out corruption and ensuring better standard of living along with security to the people of Pakistan. They reneged on every promise that they have made in the elections. Now there is a lot of opposition to the Imran Khan government in Pakistan. Coming to the next article, Nepal government signs peace pact with rebel group. So the Nepal government has had a long struggle with a rebel group of Maoists called the Nepal Communist Party. Now yesterday the Nepal government signed a peace agreement with a small communist rebel group which was widely feared because of its violent tactics. They were known for violent attacks, extortion and bombings. Due to this Maoist fighting, it has left around 17,000 people dead and hundreds and thousands of people missing till date. Now, the group which was split, the rebel group, they call themselves as the Nepal Communist Party, split from the Maoist Communist Party and fought government troops from 1966 to 2006 when it gave up its armed revolt, agreed to United Nations monitored peace talks and joined the mainstream politics. Finally, the government of Nepal and the rebel faction has come to an agreement in which they are going to give up their armed rebellion against the government of Nepal, and on its part the Nepal government is going to drop every case that they have filed against the members of the rebel group and would release anyone if they arrested till now. So this is a positive development towards restoration of normalcy in Nepal. Coming to the next article, as Iran's rupee reserve drop, traders almost halt exports. On May of 2019, US government has imposed sanctions on oil exports of Iran. Since that time, India was unable to purchase oil from the Iran government. Now, when the sanctions were earlier imposed, the Iran government agreed that they are going to buy or have an exchange basket of Indian rupees with Indian government. Meaning, since Iran was unable to use the US dollars due to sanctions, the Iranian government agreed for exchange in rupees for goods. Due to these sanctions, since we buy their oil in rupees, they buy our pulses, rice and other essential items, food items particularly, in rupees. Since 2019, India has been unable to perform trade with Iran, oil trade with Iran, and it has to go both ways. We give them money for oil, they use the same money to purchase food grains from our country. This happens in rupees. Since trade from one side has been cut off, whatever the reserve of rupees that Iran had are running low, because India is not buying oil from Iran, and there is no way that India can purchase oil from Iran because of the sanctions, and their reserves, it has to be refilled, right? India has to purchase oil and they use that same money to purchase food grains from India. It goes both ways. It's a cyclic process, and one side of the cyclic process has been chopped by the US sanctions. Now whatever the reserves of Indian rupees that Iran had are running low, and this has forced traders or merchants who trade with Iran to stop trading or take future orders, because they know that the reserves are running low, and after some time these reserves will dry up and Iran might not be able to pay for the goods that they are purchasing or importing from Indian merchants. The reason that we are discussing this topic is India's relationship with Iran is little bit complicated in this current moment. Yesterday we observed the Chabahar port day, where we discussed that Chabahar must be included in the Iran to Russian commercial link. So, and also Chabahar port, India is constructing the Chabahar port to counter Gwadar port in Pakistan. So it is very critical of India to ensure that there is a good relationship that is being fostered between Iran and India. And this comes in the way of that, because Iran might raise an issue and ask for India's help to meet its domestic food needs. And India has to, despite sanctions from United States, India must find a balanced way to engage with Iran. Now, coming to the next article, fuel prices to drop if brought under GST, says RBI research. The suggestion from the RBI research paper was that diesel and petrol must be brought under GST regime, though it would lead to a loss of little over 1 lakh crore in revenue, annual revenue for both center and state governments. Fuel prices in India would remain or fall to 75 and 68 rupees per litre respectively. Reserve Bank of India Governor Shaktikant Das had expressed hope that calibrated and coordinated reduction in high taxes levied by center and state governments on fuels. This was RBI governor saying that both central and state governments must try to bring down the oil prices, and they have to cut the taxes to do that. Now, similarly, the SBI research paper is also saying that though it will lead to a loss of revenue for the government, state governments and central governments, bringing fuel under GST will ensure that the prices of oil, both diesel and prices, will come down significantly, reducing the burden on common people. To this, our finance minister also said that both center and states need to discuss fuel taxes as they were a major source of tax revenue. It cannot be said that fuel tax is the major source of revenue for both central governments and state governments. The central government imposes a 33 rupees tax on fuel. Certain states impose anywhere between 22 rupees to 28 rupees depending on the state on fuel. And majority of the revenue that states and central government earn is through way of fuel. And cutting their share of fuel prices will directly result in fall of their revenue. So both the RBI governor and finance minister are suggesting that it has to be a two-way thing. Both center and states have to discuss, come to an agreement that yes, we are going to reduce fuel prices or our share of tax on fuel by this percentage. We have to wait and see how this thing is going to be developing or moving towards for a positive solution where burden is not placed on common citizens. Thank you. Have a good day.